I'm here.
Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of the 4 at 4. Your panel for the show is comprised of your 4 published authors: Melody Brooks, melodybrook.com, marriage and family counselor, corporate consultant, actress, producer, and advocate; Monica Shmonik, which hopefully will be joining us shortly with momsunshackled.com, the certified health coach, lobbyist, activist, and advocate; Sherry Palmer with Fixed Family Courts, constitutional scholar, co-founder of the National Family Law Policy Center, activist and advocate; and Catherine McWillie, who is the founder of CustodyCalculations.com, retired LAPD officer, parental alienation and CPS conflict expert, and advocate. And I'm your host, Lorelei. Today's topic is how to keep the thankful spirit. Take it away, Sherry.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so we all know that this is Thanksgiving week, and unfortunately, we've had a lot of tragic stories. So we wanted to talk about some positive ways that we can bring gratitude and thankfulness back into the topic this week. And I just heard, like right before we came on the show, that there's an active shooter in a hospital in Chicago. So my heart goes out to them. And this is probably going to be something that they're going to need once they get through that ordeal. So gratitude is what we're talking about today, and I wanted to start off with a quote, which is, "Gratitude makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow." And I want to start off with everyone on an article that I found, and it was 31 ways that gratitude helps improve our life, right? And number 17, I wanted to hone in on, which was gratitude helps us bounce back. Very appropriate for this week. And it says those that have more gratitude have a more proactive coping style, are more likely to have and seek out social support in times of need, are less likely to develop PTSD, and are more likely to grow in times of stress. In other words, they are more resilient. So I'm going to go ahead and let Melody take this away. Melody, do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I would say even more than that, because the reality is that people who get stuck in feeling like everything is against them really tend to move in toward depression, and it can really derail their whole life and create anxiety, and it's just a very negative spiral that you get thrown into. So when I'm working with my clients, I really work with them to help them frame the things that are happening in their life in the most positive light possible, and to consider what they have that they can be grateful for, even if it's just the fact that they woke up that morning, even if it's just that they can breathe, even if it's just the fact that they can walk and look outside and have whatever it is, because some people can't see, some people can't hear, some people can't walk, and to be grateful for whatever little bit of life that we have, help and be able to frame our lives that way changes everything in terms of how we look at everything that happens.
Yeah. So, Catherine, what do you experience when you find a lot of tragedies happening? You're in California and all those tragic fires right now. How do you usually tell people to be thankful in times like that?
Well, I'm actually going to fall back on all my years as being a law enforcement officer with LAPD. I used to tell people, it's snap of your fingers. That's how little it takes to change your life. Wrong place at the wrong time, just any number of situations that can occur. And so I dealt a lot with people in these situations where their lives are turned upside down, they're stunned, they're just coming out of shock, some of them. And, I think the first thing we can do is just give comfort in the way of holding them, families, neighbors, just holding them and hugging them and offering prayers and, being able to provide the littlest of comforts, meals or clothing or shelter. And I think once those immediate needs have been met, and I'm also speaking now about all the fires and, everything from shootings now in Thousand Oaks to all the fires we've had, not just right now, but over the last 2 years. The impact has been devastating for everyone involved. And I think once we sort of take a step back from that and we see the number of real heroes here, restaurants that are just opening up their tables in their restaurants and feeding people at no cost, first responders, families devastated, gratefulness slowly becomes a reality as they come out of shock and wonder what direction their lives are going to become.
And I know Monica has joined us. She has some experience with, the little things that make the big difference, the building up to that stuff too.
Yeah. We'll give her a minute to catch up. But also one thing that I noticed when I read this article was that repeated exposure to a same emotion produces a stimulus, right? So if we're caught up in a tragic situation, we tend to perpetuate that emotion. So if we take like 5 minutes a day, and this article talks about a gratitude journal, and try to find something positive in our day, like Melody was saying, the fact that you woke up and you get another chance to live a day where you can be a part of your loved ones' lives, you can improve somebody else's life, that's a gift. And so if you can do a journal and just think of those things, and especially for people in fires, don't focus on the material things. I know you got attached to them. I know that they became important in your life, but you got to realize that that's really not what life's about. And I remember these wise words from a grandparent when I was young, and that was, at the end of the day, when you get older to the point where you can no longer travel, you can no longer really get around on your own, what becomes important to you are the people around you, and nothing else matters. It didn't matter what chairs they had in their house, as long as they just had somewhere to sit. It didn't matter what kind of TV they had, just as long as it worked, right? So those things that were so important when you were younger no longer are as important anymore when you get older. And if you can kind of look at that, talk to some elderly people and find out what's become important to them, I think you'll find it's not materialism. So Monica, we were talking about how do we be thankful for things that we have, even in times of turmoil and in times of tragedy, and carry that through the rest of the year. So my suggestion is to go with this article, to do a gratitude journal every day for like 5 minutes. What's yours?
The gratitude journal is great. I actually put my clients through that system where they have to, write in their gratitude journal first thing in the morning for a week. And then if they really enjoy that practice and they get something out of it, then they can keep doing it after the program is finished. But for me, I'm just I don't see my son nearly enough as I should, but I'm just glad I had a child. I work with infertile women. That's my job. As a abdominal therapist, and there's women who are in their 40s who've been trying for 20 years to conceive and they can't. And here I am with a child who I don't see very often and I have almost no legal rights to, but I had a child. I went through the birthing process, and I raised him for 3.5 years without government interference. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm so glad I had 3.5 years with him. There's just,
it's funny you say that, Monica, because so many parents that I talk to, they really sometimes, not to say they don't love their child, but a lot of times they're like, I wish I never had children, because this was more stress than I ever anticipated was even possible. So I'm really glad to hear you say that you are happy that you had them. And I remember when I was speaking to a therapist, when I was going through it, he told me, he said, it's really difficult on parents at first because you're so programmed to that you will have that child for 18 years and that you will be directing that child's life and developing them and influencing them for 18 years before they go off on their own, at least, right? That program get stuck when things are being ripped from you, and it's hard to get past it. And I remember after a while, you do adjust, and you do realize that, hey, things aren't in your control. It didn't work out the way you wanted it to, and you do go through a grieving process. But there is positivity on the other side of that, like you said. If you can just find the things you're thankful for, like you said, maybe you wouldn't have experienced any of that. Some people don't have children at all, and it's a beautiful thing. We need to not forget about that. And I think what really helped too is I went through a period of time where I kind of avoided being around people who had children when I was missing my own children. I'm wondering if maybe going around other people who have children and helping them out, maybe if that wouldn't help. I don't know. I mean, Melody, you have any experience with that? So I avoided it.
What I did was actually, because I had a son that I lost to sudden infant death. And what I did was the opposite. I immersed myself in being around infants. It was a way for me to reconnect with the sense of life going on. Yes, I would go and I would hold them and I would play with them, and then I would go home and I would bawl my eyes out. But it was a way of continuing that sense that life is going on. So we all have to do what works for us. But for me, that was my way of continuing to stay connected to the sense of, yes, I had this horrific loss, but life goes on.
But now there's studies that show when you expose yourself to certain emotions, though, they actually duplicate, right? So they'll increase in your life. And that's why I was afraid to be around children, because I didn't want to increase my feeling of alienation, or my feeling of being upset about my own children not being around. So I guess what you're saying is to focus on the good parts of being around that.
Exactly.
Okay.
The life and the vitality of these infants, helped me to feel good about life. And I think part of the issue is that we have to acknowledge what was lost. We have to acknowledge the grief. We do have to validate that before we can.
I'm too stubborn for that. I was like, just
it's
angry.
the truth. You've got to let yourself acknowledge that loss. You have to acknowledge that, the trauma of these people and losing their homes in the wildfires, or like here in Texas with the people that lost their homes to Hurricane Harvey, and all the upheaval that happened as a result of that. You have to validate that, yes, indeed, those things happened. You're right. There was a loss. You have to grieve it. And then to look around and see what Monica or what Catherine was saying about the people who are out there doing these wonderful things to support you, to love you, to be there for you, to care for you, and focus on that love and what there is out there that's good. It's kind of goes back to the Mr. Rogers thing, right? Focus on the helpers.
No, that's great. I actually was thinking exactly what Melody said. It doesn't matter if you're stubborn. If you can't acknowledge that, then you can't get through to finding the gratefulness. We do have a replacement. We have Mr. Shimonik on. So it might be interesting to hear a little bit from an outsider perspective. If you don't have any background in getting through these things as directly as some of you girls, I don't know what his background is, but how would you suggest getting through and finding the thankfulness?
It's an interesting question, because one of the things I always get asked is how I survived the family court system for 10 years. And as I think people are mentioning on this call, it's an issue of perspective. So my family came here from communist Poland, and they lived through the horrors of both the Nazis and Stalin. And when I compare myself to what my parents and grandparents went through, I really have nothing to complain about, no matter how bad things are. So again, I think it depends on your background, but I think it's basically looking at perspective and knowing that your situation, as bad as it may be, could actually be worse. And I think that helps reset things as well.
See, and I agree with you, Peter, but like for those of us who didn't go through that, all I did when I was going through it, I got more angry, and I used that anger and transferred it to fight the injustices, simply because I grew up in, I grew up around very poor people, around some gangs. I was on the streets for a while as a teen, and I was very angry as an adult when this happened, not generally as an adult, but when I started going through the family courts, that they would do this to somebody who had to work so hard to get where they were, make the right decisions, follow the laws, just for the government to come in and rip your life apart after you struggled to make a good life for you and your children. And I'm impressed that, you could go back and pull from your ancestors. And I think that's a great, great piece of wisdom, because I wish I had thought of that. Maybe, yes, my anger empowered me, but I think it would have helped to have,
I was going to say, Sherry, that I'm grateful that you had that anger, because that anger is what motivates us to make change. That the reason we have anger is to tell us something is wrong and something needs to be done differently. And you took that and did something really wonderful, and they're continuing to do something really powerful and important with that anger. So I don't think that having that anger is a bad thing.
So now can we take this to another level? What can people do now who still have marriages, but they're maybe on the brink and they want to salvage those marriages? How do they, let's remind them first that after they're in a marriage for a long time, they stop seeing the positive things because it's around them all the time, right? So they need to really put effort in seeing those things again and working on strengthening that marriage. I think gratitude, like what you just did, Melody, if we were in a marriage, you said, honey, so glad you used that anger well. I don't think we acknowledge our spouse enough like that. Right?
I think that's right. And because we get so resentful, and a lot of times what I see in my practice is that people don't speak their truth. And so instead they hold this resentment, and their anger comes out sideways. And one of the ways it comes out sideways is that it prevents them from being able to acknowledge the good things about them, because they're so angry about these other things. And if they would be just courageous enough to speak their truth, and I've seen it hundreds of times in my practice where people come in and they've got so much resentment. Both parties are feeling, one party is feeling completely put down, the other is completely resentful. And when the communication can be opened up enough that the person speaks their truth, and their partner is able to really hear them and validate and empathize with what they're saying, they can move on from that and begin to see and appreciate the positive things about each other.
You know what book? What book I found was really pretty powerful for a lot of parents and dealing with this issue and gratitude is the earlier versions of the book Chicken Soup. I just found that a lot of my clients walked away saying, wow, just the word saying thank you in the marriage more often. Because, even though we're all in the business of divorce and dealing with the impact of custody and divorce, we all really believe in marriages, and we would love to be out of business. We would love for everyone's marriage to have a happy ending. And, that may not be possible, but you can make a better situation out of a divorce than what's oftentimes the case right now. And I think Chicken Soup does a great job for parents just to read something in those quiet moments of their lives when maybe the children are down, or the wife or the husband is gone, or it's been a particularly difficult day.
And I also think you're right, Catherine, and being able to say thank you more, even when you're going, I work with couples and try to do my best to keep them together, help them figure out a way through it. But sometimes it happens that there's no alternative but to separate. And when that happens, even then you can notice and be grateful for what you can of not only of the relationship, but of that person as a spouse and as a parent, and say thank you. I know that's really hard when you're going through a divorce, but to be able to say thank you and appreciate it and have gratitude for maybe the fact that they're willing to do their part and step in and be a parent, the fact that they do love their children, the things that they're doing to support their children. And even if they're not the way you would do it, just express that gratitude.
Exactly.
Well, I think we need to put some placeholders around some of the words. Just say thank you by itself and alone. Parents need a little bit more instruction why it's important. And I think divorce can be an opportunity for parents that do not wish to be together any longer. It doesn't have to be this terrible situation, but it's just every day, like you said, when we first started, is that saying gratitude and having a gratitude book, I think in combination with 2 or 3 actions. It's never enough. One person or one solution is never sufficient to handle all problems, but a combination like the gratitude book and therapy or counseling, or in addition to some great books, get a parent to a much better position.
Yeah, and it, like you said, that thank you part, that part's a little hard for me to swallow. Like if they're going through a divorce and if the other person's being difficult, I don't know so much about whether or not I would have thanked my ex, but I certainly could have tried to look for a more positive approach, and not focus so much on the things that I didn't like about how he was doing things. So I do like that part. And then I think that helps you see things a little more clearly. So another thing about gratitude with the studies that they did was that when you focus more on positive things, your brain will go into a clearer place so you can actually make better decisions. And then I think you'll fight less on the things that are just differences, right? Minor differences. And you can get past that and then say, all right, fine, that person's different. But what's really important is that, we have this child who has these needs, and maybe you can get past all those little differences. But I also think the thank you part, the reason I say that it was hard for me to swallow that is because I think maybe the other side doesn't always hear everything you say. And if you thank them for something that sounds odd, or they know that you don't like, would that actually be your genuine self? So
yeah, I'm definitely not advocating saying thank you for things that you can't be authentic about.
Right. And thank you is really more for, trying to keep a marriage together. But I think if we were less aggressive toward the other parent when we're going through divorce and did say, appreciate you brought the kids on time, appreciate that you did that, instead of, substitute words depending on the situation, but the result is still the same. You're in gratitude that the children are home on time. You're in gratitude that the children are, doing well in school. You're in gratitude that the other person communicated the doctor's appointment or dental appointment. And that I think is really important.
I like that. And then you might find that they'll be shocked that, oh my gosh, you actually didn't say something negative to me. Might have avoided the fight.
As the recipient of gratitude, it allows you forgiveness for the other person a little bit too, right? It allows you to let go maybe of some of the resentment when you feel appreciated. One of the strongest ways that we can express love to each other is through gratitude. And it doesn't have to be done, it doesn't mean in love as in, romantic relationship, but love just as human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. And focus on yourself, improving your own life satisfaction and happiness. And the reason I focused on gratitude today is because it said that when you focus on gratitude, you actually also lower the feelings of envy, jealousy. A lot of people that are going through breakups, especially this time of year, if you've got to deal with your ex has brought in a new girlfriend or boyfriend. If you work on gratitude and envy are opposite emotions, and there isn't room for both at the same time. So that jealousy thing won't rear up as badly. At least that's what the studies say. Like I said, I didn't really study this that much when I went through it, so I didn't actually try that. I know that I've tried some of these methods after the fact, and they have had positive results. So maybe some of you guys can be bigger than I was at the time. Sorry, but when my children were missing or I felt like they were being taken from me, it was really hard for me to get past that. And I'm hoping this will help other parents do better than I did and do better than the past parents did.
So why do you think that the thankful spirit is in plentiful supply right now, but it kind of diminishes through the year. How can we prevent that and keep it as a daily or yearly thing that they improve that feeling? And especially for everyone, there's so many families right now who have lost their children right before the holidays, have lost their homes right before the holidays. So how do you take all this thankful, grateful spirit where everyone's helping each other out now and extend that through and get through that complete loss?
Great question, Lorelei, by the way. Really a great thought. I think that most people are more grateful in times of distress. So the fires, the shootings have definitely increased everyone's gratitude for their family, for their neighbors, for their friends, for each other. And then for families not facing such dire circumstances, I think parents get exhausted by the process of, the whole year, especially if they're dealing with family law court. So I think it's just the holidays bring about the reminder of gratitude, and I think that's a good thing.
So how about you, Peter? How do you think, how can we carry on that thankful feeling or great gratitude throughout the year?
So it's interesting listening to this conversation, because one thing is, prior to the divorce, I think there's a lot of value in saying thank you and being grateful. But I think certain people actually respond better to gestures of gratitude. So as an example, if you're in a dark place and you may think you might be headed for divorce, is to look at yourself and say, how can I show the other person that I still appreciate them? And it could be something as simple as making them coffee in the morning. Or if the guy's out working in the yard, bring him a beer, something that's simple, or folding laundry for them. Something that they're not going to expect, but you're basically sending the message that I don't want this going in a bad place, and this is what I'm doing for you. Because I think there's a perspective with some people that you may be saying that you're grateful for me, but you're being facetious. You don't really mean that. But if you do an act of kindness, that means something totally different, because you actually have to put effort into doing it. It's not just words.
Right.
The second aspect is, if you've already gone through a divorce and you've already lost your kids or lost your home, I think what everyone's saying is very poignant, because at this time of year, what happens is you begin to think about the past year and what you didn't get. I didn't get my kids back. I lost my job. I've lost the home that I'm living in. So what you have to do is focus on, what am I going to do differently next year? What am I going to live? What can I do as a next step? And, one of the best pieces of sage advice that I got during my case was, I had a older gentleman who told me, take the long view. So you may be in a very depressed situation right now. You may be in a very difficult situation, but consider how many more years you have to go before you will see your kid again, because he's 18, and just keep your focus there. And if you have that kind of mindset, as difficult as it may be, as those years go by and those holiday seasons go by, you realize, we only have 2 years left. I only have 3 years left, and it just opens a whole new world for you. And I think, again, it's very difficult to get to that place, but once you've gone through every emotion with the anger, the sadness, and everything else, if you keep that focus, I think that's very constructive. Because then what you do is what all of us have done, is channel our energies to making change for ourselves, but also for other people as well.
I think that second point is great, because although we've talked a lot about saying thank you to other people, when you're in a dark place, it's hard to just give to other people. It's hard to give more of yourself away. So you have to think of something, what are, tips to make sure you give something back to yourself as well.
And the studies do show that, absolutely. And the studies show that if you don't quite feel it yet, but you do the act of kindness, that eventually will become your genuine self. You can actually change your personality by changing your behavior.
It was interesting. One of the pieces of advice I got a long time ago is, especially during the holiday season, if you find yourself alone or you've lost your home or lost your job, is to do some volunteer work. Go to a soup kitchen during the holidays. And that'll just change your perspective immediately, because, again, you're seeing with people that may be in a worse situation than you are, and you can help them. And that makes you feel good at the end of the day. Is it going to fill the hole that you have? No, but it's something that you could do constructively to say, I'm not going to sit in this position that I'm in right now.
And
yep.
I think that helps some, but I think I would disagree a little bit with Sherry's statement on, the fake it till you make it type thing, because you have to be careful if you're not also focusing on giving back to yourself. If you're really in a dark place, that can even create resentment if you're not focusing on your self-help. And maybe Melody would have a little bit more information on that. But
Yeah, you absolutely have to take care of yourself first. It's the old put the oxygen on yourself first before you give it to someone else. So yeah, I'm with you, Lorelei, that definitely we have to be willing to appreciate and value and give to ourselves, or we end up losing all that we gain by trying to give to other people. So it's very important that you recognize and appreciate yourself and have gratitude for what you've done, and appreciate and empower yourself for the things that you've done positive.
Okay, well, I think we'd have to wrap up. So any closing words from you, Peter?
Yeah, the only thought that I would have is, and this may be something that's specific to men, is don't be afraid to ask for help. If you find yourself in a very dark place, reach out to other men. Go online, to take the situation. That'll be very helpful too.
I like that.
Thank you, Peter, for guest starring for us and filling in for Monica, and Sherry and Melody and Catherine. I think this was a much needed topic, and I hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye.
Bye.